The night my mother told me she would rather lose me than accept my black husband was the night I finally understood how conditional her love had always been. I was standing in her kitchen with my husband Marcus beside me when she pushed my wedding ring back across the table and told me she could not support what I was doing. My father stayed silent. My sister looked at the floor. Marcus did not argue with anyone. He simply took my hand and said we should leave. What happened after that made me question whether my family had ever wanted me to be happy at all. My name is Lauren. I am 34 years old and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. Before Marcus came into my life, I had never imagined that the person I loved would become the reason my own family stopped speaking to me. Marcus was 36 and worked as a civil engineer. He was patient, funny, and steady in a way I had never experienced before. He remembered small things. He showed up when he said he would. When my car broke down on a rainy night, he drove nearly an hour just to make sure I got home safely. I knew within months that I wanted to marry him. My parents did not feel the same way. At first, my mother tried to hide it behind polite comments. She asked whether I was sure I wanted to marry someone from a different background. Then she started asking questions about his family. She wanted to know where his parents lived, what they did for work, and whether I really understood what life would be like after marriage. I kept answering calmly because I wanted to believe she was simply worried about me. Then the comments became harder to ignore. She told me Marcus would never understand our family. She said raising children would be complicated. She even asked me once whether I wanted my future children to grow up looking different from everyone else in our family. I was shocked. I told her that Marcus was the kindest man I had ever met and that our future children would be loved. She said I was being emotional. Marcus never responded angrily. Whenever I told him what my mother had said, he would simply tell me that he hoped one day she would see him for who he actually was. That was one of the reasons I loved him. He never asked me to hate my family just because they were hurting him. We got engaged quietly. I had planned a small dinner to tell my parents together. Instead, my mother found out from my sister before I had the chance. She called me that night and told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. I told her I was not asking permission. I was telling her because she was my mother and I wanted her there. She said she could not promise that. My father eventually agreed to attend the wedding, but my mother refused. She told relatives that she was sick and could not travel. I knew that was not true. The wedding was beautiful anyway. Marcus cried when he saw me walking toward him. My best friend cried. His parents cried. My father came and hugged me afterward. My mother did not. For the first year of our marriage, I barely spoke to her. Marcus encouraged me to keep the door open. He said that people sometimes needed time to confront their own prejudice. I wanted to believe him. Then I became pregnant. When I told my mother, she went silent. I thought she was finally going to soften. Instead, she asked whether Marcus's family would be involved in raising the baby. I told her of course they would. She said she did not think that was a good idea. That was the first time I stopped trying to convince her. My son Elijah was born 8 months later. Marcus was an incredible father from the first day. He would wake up at night before I even asked. He learned how to braid Elijah's hair after watching tutorials because he wanted to be able to do everything for his son. He took him to the park every Saturday morning. My mother refused to visit. Then one afternoon she appeared at our house without warning. She brought a gift for Elijah but barely looked at Marcus. She asked to hold the baby. Marcus handed him over. My mother stared at Elijah for a long time and then said something I will never forget. She said she hoped he would grow up knowing which side of the family he really belonged to. Marcus heard it. He quietly took Elijah back. He did not say anything. That night I told my mother she could not come into our home and speak about my husband or my child that way. She said I had chosen him over my family. I told her I had chosen my family. She hung up. For almost 3 years we barely spoke. Then something happened that changed everything. Marcus received a promotion and was offered a major leadership position with a company in Atlanta. It was an opportunity he had worked toward for years. We were considering moving when my father called me late one night. His voice sounded frightened. He said my mother had been hiding something from me. I asked what he meant. He told me that she had been telling relatives for years that Marcus had abandoned me financially and that she was secretly supporting me and Elijah. I knew it was a lie. Marcus had paid most of our household expenses since the day we married. But my father said there was more. He had recently discovered that my mother had been contacting Marcus's employer and sending them accusations about his character. She had tried to make them believe he was unstable and irresponsible. I could not understand why she would go that far. Then my father said he had found a folder in her office. It contained copies of emails and letters she had written about Marcus. He told me there was one document that I needed to see because it explained why she had been trying so hard to destroy my marriage. I drove to my parents' house the next morning. My mother was not there. My father handed me the folder. I opened it expecting to find angry letters. Instead, I found something that made my hands go cold. It was a document dated 2 weeks before my wedding, and the name written across the top was not Marcus's. It was mine. I opened the document and saw my own name at the top. Underneath, it was a statement my mother had prepared before my wedding. It said that if I married Marcus, she would cut me out of the family business and make sure I received nothing from my parents in the future. But then I noticed something else. The document had been signed by my sister too. I asked my father why he had allowed this. He looked ashamed and told me he had tried to stop them. My mother had convinced everyone that Marcus was only marrying me because he wanted access to our family's money. She had even told them that he planned to leave once he got what he wanted. My father admitted that she had spent months collecting anything she could use against him. She had taken screenshots of harmless conversations and twisted them into something suspicious. She had contacted one of Marcus's old co-workers and asked questions about his finances. She had even tried to convince me that Marcus was hiding money from me. I suddenly understood why my mother had always wanted me to doubt him. She was not simply uncomfortable with our marriage. She had been trying to break it before it even started. Then my father showed me the document that changed everything. It was a copy of an email Marcus had sent him 2 weeks before our wedding. In it, Marcus said he knew my mother did not trust him, but he would never ask me to choose between him and my family. He told my father that he was willing to sign a prenuptial agreement because he wanted everyone to know he was marrying me for love. I started crying because Marcus had never told me that. He had protected my family even while they were trying to destroy his reputation. My father said there was one more thing I needed to know. My mother had contacted Marcus privately before our wedding and offered him money to leave me. Marcus had refused. He never told me because he did not want to humiliate me with what she had done. My father had found proof of the offer in an old email account. That was when I realized Marcus had spent years carrying pain I never knew existed because he had been trying to protect me from it. I went home that night and told Marcus everything. He listened quietly. Then he said he was not surprised. I asked him why he had never told me. He said because he knew I loved my mother and he did not want me to spend the rest of my life choosing sides. I asked him if he still wanted anything to do with my family. He looked at me and said he wanted peace. That answer broke my heart because I knew he had spent years trying to earn acceptance from people who had decided they would never give it to him. The next morning my mother called. She said my father had betrayed her and that I needed to hear her side. I agreed to meet her. She arrived angry and defensive. She said everything she had done was because she loved me. She said she had been afraid Marcus would hurt me. I asked her why she had offered him money to leave. She denied it. I placed the email on the table. She stared at it and went silent. Then she admitted it. She said she believed Marcus was taking me away from my family. I told her that he had never asked me to leave anyone. She had been the one forcing me to choose. She started crying and said she wanted another chance. I told her that forgiveness was possible, but trust would not return simply because she apologized. My sister eventually admitted that she had signed the document because she believed everything Mom told her. She apologized to Marcus. He accepted her apology but told her that acceptance did not erase what happened. Months passed. My father slowly rebuilt his relationship with us. My mother did not. She needed time to understand that losing access to my life was not something Marcus had caused. It was the consequence of her own choices. Marcus and I eventually moved to Atlanta because of his new position. We built a quiet life there with Elijah. My son grew up knowing both sides of his family, but he also grew up hearing one important lesson from his father. You never have to make yourself smaller so someone else can feel comfortable loving you. Years later, my mother came to our house. She stood at the door and asked if she could meet her grandson. I let her in. She looked at Marcus and said she was sorry. Not for losing me, not for being embarrassed. She apologized for judging him before she ever gave him a chance. Marcus nodded and told her that he appreciated the apology. They did not suddenly become close. There was no magical ending where everything was forgotten. But that day was the first time my mother looked at my husband and saw the man who had loved her daughter for years instead of the color of his skin. And I realized something. My family thought Marcus was taking me away from them when the truth was that he had spent years trying to bring peace between us. The person who had created the distance was the person who claimed to be protecting me. Today Marcus and I are still together. Elijah is older now and he knows that his family comes from different backgrounds and that there is nothing wrong with that. My mother is slowly rebuilding a relationship with him. I do not know if our family will ever be exactly what it was before. Honestly, I do not want it to be. I would rather have a smaller family built on honesty than a larger one built on fear and prejudice. Loving someone from a different background should never require you to prove the person deserves basic dignity. Marcus did not need to become someone my family approved of. He only needed to remain the man I already knew him to be. And eventually the truth became impossible for my family to ignore. If your family rejected the person you loved because of race, would you keep trying to earn their acceptance? Or would you walk away and build your own family without them? Thank you for listening to Stories with Hazel. Sometimes the hardest choice is not choosing between the person you love and the people who raised you. It is choosing whether you will allow anyone to make love feel like something you have to apologize for.